Okay, well, everybody just minded so well, I can't hardly believe it. Thank you. We're going to get started. So I'd like to begin by introducing all the VIPs in the room and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We have Patty Cafferata, former state treasurer, of course, and our speaker tonight. We have Dana Bennett, Dr. Dana Bennett, who's also our speaker tonight, former president of the Nevada Mining Association. We also have, where's Clara? Clara Andriola, there she is. County Commissioner Clara Andriola and Alexis Hansen, Assemblyman Alexis Hansen's right there. And Stacy Parabuck is also here. She works for Congressman Mark Amodei. And Melissa Clement is the head of the Nevada Right to Life and on my board of directors. Let's see, and Shantae Lassard is also one of our advisory council members. And where's Tiffany? Tiffany East is right there. She's an advisory council member as well. Who am I missing? There's probably somebody else important in here that I should introduce, but it's glaring at me from the sun, so I can't tell. Anyway, if I missed you, kick me later. Thank you for coming, everybody. I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain what my organization does. For those of you who are new, I know there are several people here from the Nevada Women's History Project and several people here from SME and other mining-oriented organizations, and almost all of the brain trust of the Women's Mining Coalition, several of them. Thank you very much for coming, guys. And Mary Corpy, who is the incoming president-elect of the Society of Mining Engineers and Exploration. So anyway, carrying on. So we have an organization. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan nonprofit, and we're a leadership development training organization. And we provide opportunities for people to learn how to be civically engaged. If you want to do advocacy, if you want to learn how to get on boards and commissions, if you want to do deep dives into issue analysis, that's the kind of thing we teach. And we also provide leadership development. These dinners are designed for leadership development by showcasing outstanding women's leadership champions. And whatever their background is, it's usually someone who has a nexus with serving on boards and commissions or running for office, etc. So that's what the purpose of these are. We're trying to build a community of like-minded people that are interested in this kind of thing and need to see the examples of others who have done it before and succeeded against all odds and stuff like that. So that's the Nevada Women's Leadership Alliance. What we're going to do tonight is Dana Bennett will go first, and I'll introduce her in a moment. And then after she's done, Patty will give her remarks. We have a handout for Patty's presentation. Dana has a PowerPoint presentation, and Patty's just going to regale us with wonderful stories. Then we'll do Q&A at the end. So if you could hold your questions until each presentation is over, that would be much appreciated. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dana Bennett. So, hang on, I got to get to the bio. We are honored to have Dr. Dana Bennett here tonight. She returned from retirement recently and served on the interim president of the Nevada Mining Association until the association was able to install their current president, Amanda Hilton. She also was going to be here, but she has a board meeting, so never mind. Dana has a long association with the Nevada Mining Association and the Nevada mining industry in general. As president from 2014 to 2020 of the Nevada Mining Association, she represented Nevada mining in a wide variety of venues, from Elko to Ghana to Australia to Las Vegas. Before that, NVMA and individual companies had contracted with her for projects and advocacy. She began her public policy career in Nevada as a legislative researcher and was staff director for the Nevada Legislative Committee on Public Lands for nearly 10 years. She served on Governor Brian Sandoval's staff and on the Nevada Governor's Board of Economic Development under Governor Sisolak. In 2022, she served as the interim executive director for the Kenny Gwynn Center for Policy Priorities in Nevada's only nonpartisan think tank, and was also involved to speak about critical minerals at the International Women's Forum's World Leadership Conference. Wow, that's cool. With a PhD in history, Dana's knowledge of Nevada runs deep, and her network spans the entire state. Dana's vast experience and knowledge are renowned in Nevada. NWLA is honored that she is here to share the stories of many women leaders in Nevada's past and their connections to Nevada's founding industry, mining. So welcome, Dana. We're honored to have you. I'll let you adjust that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be here. I'm going to take Liz with me everywhere I go to do my introduction. That was lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to attempt to do technology here. Dave, should I point this in a particular direction? Look at that. There. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the intersection between Nevada women, Nevada politics, and Nevada mining. And we're going to do this in 3 buckets, essentially. So first, we're going to talk about women in Nevada who were able to be elected to certain offices, but not allowed to vote. Isn't that kind of fun? And then we're going to talk about the women who opposed suffrage, which is also another kind of fun topic. And then we're going to talk about mining women, miners who were engaged in elected politics after suffrage. So first I have to ask a couple of basic questions. Who can tell me when Nevada became a state? What year? Well done. Almost everybody said it. 1864. What year did Nevada women gain the right to vote in state elections? Oh boy. Patty, we have our work cut out for us. In 1914, the all-male electorate of Nevada approved an amendment to the state constitution that allowed Nevada women to vote in state and local elections. So that's 50 years from the Constitution when that was adopted to when women could vote. So we're going to start here. Women being elected but can't vote. So this is the key clause in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, this is the original handwritten version of the Constitution. I'm sure y'all can read it, right? So what this says, every white male citizen of the United States not laboring under the disabilities named in this Constitution of the age of 21 years and upwards, who shall have actually and not constructively resided in the state 6 months and in the district or county 30 days next preceding any election shall be it goes on and on, telling who can vote. And essentially, it's not women. They do not fall under this, this definition at all. But the discussion about whether women should have the right to vote began immediately. And in the 19th century, the Nevada legislature looked at several resolutions that would allow women to vote. And many of you know, because you've been involved in ballot questions and amendments to the Constitution, the way that it works in Nevada is that the Nevada legislature passes a resolution that proposes an amendment to the Constitution. The next session of the legislature must pass the exact same resolution with the same language. If they do so, then it goes to the voters at the next regular election, unless the legislature sets up a special election, which they've done from time to time. That's the system we're familiar with, but it's not the system that was in place originally. So as the legislature was considering resolutions to allow women to vote, they really didn't even have a process. They really weren't sure exactly what they were doing. But I want to point out a couple of things here. In 1869, Curtis Hillier was an assemblyman who proposed a resolution that was passed, And it would be tempting to say that Nevada was very progressive in 1869 in terms of considering the rights of women to vote, but there were things happening on a national level, which is why that resolution was introduced. Can anyone tell me who was granted the franchise around, I'll give you a hint, after the Civil War? Black men. This resolution was introduced as a counterpart to that. There was concern in the legislature about who would be voting. And so it was not that they wanted women to vote, it was that they wanted additional voters because there was concerns about expanding the franchise. As it turned out, that was not an issue that resonated in Nevada. When the resolution came back in 1871, it failed. And then we see this area here between 1873 and 1881 where it looks like nothing was happening. But at that point, they were starting to talk about letting women vote in school elections. And this becomes critical to what's happening now. On a national level, there were many suffrage organizations who had decided, well, if we take a small bite of the apple and women can vote in school elections, then maybe we can move forward for women to vote in all elections. And by 1885, across the United States, there were about 15 states that allowed women to vote in school elections. Nevada thought about it, didn't do it. But then in 1885, we have Mr. Shirley over here from Lyon County, who introduced a resolution that would allow women to serve in office. So it wasn't an amendment allowing them to vote. The section about suffrage was not changed. The proposal was to change the other section that said who could run for office. And his amendment would allow women to serve in school board offices, school trustee offices, and county superintendents. Now, we're all familiar with the system where we have one school district for each county. At this time, there was a school district on every block. Every little town had its own school district. Every little town had its own school board. And then there was a county superintendent that oversaw all of the various districts. The resolution passed relatively easily. And as you can see in the Battle Mountain paper, it's starting to spread across the state that women can run for these offices. They can't vote, but they can run for them. And here we have Mrs. Gossett, who was elected as school trustee in Bull Run. This is Bull Run. Those of you who know Elko County, it's not far from Charleston, right, Assemblywoman? It is near the Wilson Reservoir. And some very interesting things have come out of Bull Run. Not only the first woman to be elected as school trustee in Nevada, but also the first director of the Modern Bureau of Land Management was born here in Bull Run, which I think is kind of one of those fun little mining facts. I've got to squeeze in some mining facts. But for some reason, and it's not clear whether records are available, the courts threw out this particular action in 1885, 87. I'm going to mess that up. Let's go. Oh, I have to go back here. Women were involved in the legislative session, even though they couldn't vote. And I love this piece here from the Carson City Appeal, telling women that if you want to work for the legislature, you got to go talk to this guy. Isn't he cute? He was the major lobbyist at the Nevada legislature. His name was Black Wallace. He represented railroads. They were the major industry, right? You're getting to the end, right? Go talk to this guy, honey. He'll find you a job. And so as it turns out, we have a lot of women who are involved in the legislative process. And it's important to remember that even though there is a male domination in these institutions, women are still very much a part of it. And the legislature revisited the idea of women serving as school trustees and as county superintendents. And the Winnemucca paper said in 1887, on the last day of the session, the legislature adopted the amendment to the Constitution making women eligible to the offices of county school superintendents and school trustees. This would indicate that our lawmakers were disposed to gallantry were it not for the fact that they abolished the office of school superintendent before adopting the proposed amendment. This amendment does not even give the fair sex the privilege of voting for school trustees, but leaves it wholly with the tyrant man to say whether or not a woman shall be elected to the office. If Mr. Shirley is a bachelor, and presumably he is, as Benedicts are not disposed to give women any more rights than they now have, the Lincoln County ladies should punish him, as they best know how, for burlesquing their claims to political equality by proposing an amendment to the Constitution to make them eligible for offices, one of which is virtually abolished and the other unprofitable. But women started running for office. So this is what happened in 1889. The legislature, as I said, when the resolution is passed twice, they can call a special election or have it voted on in a regular election. They called a special election in February of 1889 and added this section to the clause, the provision that says who can run for office. This is Article 15, Section 3. And again, if you think about the time period, there was a lot of concern about people who had been involved in duels. So, no person who, while a citizen of this state, has, since the adoption of this Constitution, fought a duel with a deadly weapon, sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with a deadly weapon, either within or beyond the border boundaries of the state, or who has acted as a second, or knowingly conveyed a challenge, or aided or assisted in any manner in fighting a duel, shall be allowed to hold any office of honor, profit, or trust. Then in 1889, it was added, the legislature shall provide by law for giving force and effect to the foregoing provisions, provided that females over the age of 21, and then you can see the rest of the language here, that they shall be eligible to the office of county superintendent and school trustee. And the Reno newspaper helpfully pointed out that any woman who had been involved in a duel should just not apply, because she is not going to be able to serve in this office. But women did. Women ran across the state, and this is where you find them in mining towns, which would make sense. Most of the men are engaged in mining. They're not engaged in running schools. It was very important to mothers and wives that there were schools for their children. And so they did take on the role of school trustees. We have, so, oops, whoa, gee whiz. Right, I'm done. That was it. So in the Reno area, we have Mrs. Caroline Norcross, who was put forward as the candidate for the Prohibition Party for the Women's Christian Temperance Union. She did not win, but it was interesting that the newspaper endorsed her, said that she would be a marvelous school trustee, and I think her son went on to become a Supreme Court justice, if I'm remembering correctly. But in the smaller counties, in the smaller mining towns, so we have the mining town of Hamilton, mining town of Galena, and the mining town of Lewis, all in Lander County, we have women who are elected as school trustees, although they can't vote for each other or for themselves. And this picture here is the Galena School. Galena was located right outside of Battle Mountain. There's not much left of Galena, and this photo is unidentified, but when you look at how few children there are and how many women there are, this is probably the school board, which is to find photos of women. First of all, to find photos of women in Nevada history is rare. To find women in political roles is incredibly rare. So those are our first school trustees. Then there were women who ran for county superintendent. And the first ones who were elected were Elko County and Humboldt County. These positions were partisan, and the women had to go to the county convention and stand for office. Again, they can't vote for themselves, they can't vote for each other, but the men were nominating them for these roles, and they were contested. So you can see here with Mrs. Susan Miller, there was a guy who never, he wasn't even close. Mrs. Miller was far and away the choice. She was very well known in the community. She and her husband had arrived in Unionville in the 1860s. She taught in Unionville for many years, and they moved to Winnemucca when the county seat was moved from Unionville to Winnemucca in 1873, and he served as one of the first sheriffs. I believe he was passed away by 1890, but she was very well known in the community. And the Winnemucca newspaper went, oop, there I go again. It's the wrong button. I have to stop playing with the buttons. Anyway, Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Abel, the newspaper is very complimentary about them and essentially tells the voters, again, the all-male voters, you can't go wrong with either one. But Mrs. Miller becomes the first county superintendent of Humboldt County. Over in Elko County, Josephine Taylor was a very well-known teacher and had taught in many of the small mining towns and also in the town of Elko. She is elected a county superintendent, and eventually Mrs. Taylor ends up here in Reno. Her daughter married a Huffaker and was a prominent part of this community. But as I say down here, I'm gonna stop touching these buttons. The legislature giveth and the legislature taketh away. In 1892, they decided that because Nevada was struggling economically, that they would combine county offices. And I know Patty will be really sorry she missed this. The district attorney was required to also be the county school superintendent. And women could not run for district attorney. So that was the end of women serving as county superintendents. I'm not sure what's going on over here in Lincoln County. When they elected Sarah Wedge in 1902, that was technically unconstitutional, but nobody challenged it, and she served her full 4-year term as the county superintendent of schools. By 1896, at least 24 women have been elected to serve as school trustees across the state of Nevada. And the newspaper commented on that quite often, that as you can see here, it's nothing new or novel for women to serve in elected office. And we're rather hopeful for what women's suffrage might mean for the state. I'll just assume all right, I'm hearing the giggles, you've gotten to the end. But then in 1907, school superintendent Orvis Ring formally requested from the Attorney General a ruling on whether women could be deputy school superintendents. They had just reorganized the school system, and there was one state school superintendent who had several deputies under whom the counties were assigned. And the Attorney General said, no, women cannot be deputy superintendents of public instruction. His legal argument was pretty shaky. And there was quite an outcry against that there was a belief across the state that women had served in these roles well and should continue to do so. So the constitutional amendment process started over again. And in 1909, I'm going to touch that button, here we go. 1909, Assemblyman Merton introduced the legislation that added these specific offices to those who have not fought in a duel, who could serve in office. It was approved again in 1911, and it passed easily in 1912. Those of you who are familiar with the process of full suffrage for women, these are key years. The resolution that allowed women to vote was first passed in 1911. 1912, we see the campaign take off. I had to include a picture of Lem Allen. Lem Allen was an assemblyman from Churchill County. He served as speaker in the 1890s and earlier, where we saw the list of where early legislatures had considered suffrage. He was a consistent opponent to suffrage. And sometimes he was very charming in his, the ladies are too pure and kind, they shouldn't be part of politics. And sometimes he said, well, literally, Eve screwed up, and so the women shouldn't be allowed to vote. The fun thing about Lem is that his daughter becomes one of the first women elected to the legislature from Churchill County. And, there is such a thing as karma. It was important for Nevada, really, that that women were allowed to serve in this role of deputy superintendent, because this is where Maud Fraser started her political career. She was the deputy superintendent. She had been a teacher in mining towns, especially in Nye County. She became the deputy superintendent for Southern Nevada. She then goes on to become the principal of Las Vegas High School. And after she retired, she was elected to serve in the legislature beginning in 1950 and was really instrumental in establishing the sales tax that helped fund schools. All right, so enough about school trustees. This is a story that I have been fascinated by for quite a while. And I wrote an article that is in one of the recent issues of the Nevada Historical Quarterly about the women who opposed suffrage. And the conventional wisdom is that Anne Martin organized a tremendous campaign, and that, of course, all women wanted the right to vote. And the few women who were opposed did so because their husbands made them. But there's a much more interesting story. And yes, Anne Martin did organize an amazing campaign. She, through the Nevada Equal Franchise Society, established chapters in every mining town, in every county, and visited every mining town to talk to the voters about women's suffrage. And here she is standing in a car in Fallon, gave speeches, very, very active. And she essentially set the standard and the strategy for campaigns, winning campaigns that Nevadans have followed ever since in terms of not relying on the establishment, essentially. The anti-suffragists took a slightly different approach. So there was an organization called the Nevada Association of Women Opposed to Equal Suffrage. And if you look at the official history that came out after 1914, it makes it sound like there weren't very many, a couple of women, just sort of cranky ones over here. And remember, history is written by the victors. This was quite an extensive organization. They first met here at the Lee Mansion on Court Street. This is Ada Lee. And she was a very prominent society, I'll use an old word, society matron in Reno. There were probably 200 women at the organizational meeting, and they chose different chapters and set up different chapters for the to try to oppose it, but only in populated areas. And those of you who have been involved in statewide campaigns, you're going to recognize this. They decided that because their husbands were prominent, they were also prominent as part of the establishment. Really, all they needed to do was persuade the large population areas, and they would carry the day. The president was former First Lady Emma Adams. Her husband had been governor in the 1890s. And I've mentioned Ada. Isabel Fletcher, who wrote one of the very few letters to the editor. At this time, there weren't a lot of letters to the editor, but she wrote a very detailed letter to the editor in response to Anne Martin being angry that the 20th Century Club, which was the prominent women's organization at the time, would not take a position on suffrage. Now the 20th Century Club will tell you that they supported suffrage, but they didn't really do it until about 1915, after the vote. Up until that time, they were very careful with their membership. They had many prominent members who were not supportive of suffrage, and many who were. And Isabel was president of the 20th Century Club at the time. And they really did. So they have speeches, people who came in from Washington, D.C. to talk about why suffrage should not be passed. And really their position was they were looking at things as a republic and not necessarily as a democracy. And they considered the family as a unit, and the unit would have one vote as opposed to each individual in the unit having a vote. They were concerned about losing status, really. If suddenly everybody could vote, that would give them some concern. One of my favorite little factoids, I guess, about the Nevada Association of Women Opposed to Equal Suffrage. This is where the secretary lived, on Ridge Street. This house still stands over on Ridge Street. She was Clara Field Stadmuller. Her husband was Fred Stadmuller, Ann Martin's favorite cousin. And you just have to wonder what Thanksgiving dinner was like, as we've got the prominent anti-suffragists on one side and the prominent suffragist on the other. But at the end of the day, in 1914, women did win the right to vote. And it's interesting to look at how the vote turned out. There were 4 counties that opposed the ballot question. And they were some of the oldest, most established towns in Nevada, and especially Reno. If you look here at Washoe County, suffrage lost in Washoe County, and that's because of Reno, and that was because of the prominence of the women who had opposed it. But here is where you see the impact of mining. Visiting every single mining town, setting up chapters in each little town. And I can imagine for my own town of Midas, Mrs. George Brady, Margaret Brady, was the head of the chapter. And I'm pretty sure she ran the store there. So I'll bet she talked to every man who walked into that store. Pretty sure she was close to the polling space that day. And it passed 69-8. That happened in nearly every mining town. In Nye County, out of 27 precincts, only suffrage lost in only 1 precinct, and that was by 1 vote. And remember, it's all men who are voting, but they are being encouraged by the organization within their towns. The other thing that I think was happening was, George Wingfield was essentially the owner-operator of Nevada at the time. He was prominent in politics, in mining, in gambling, in banking. He was the powerhouse in Nevada. And he said if suffrage passed, he was leaving the state. He was gone. Well, if you look through George's papers, which are up at the Nevada Historical Society, there's reams of letters, 2 kinds of letters. One is, Dear Mr. Wingfield, I've found it. I need a grub stake. Would you please help support my mining venture? With a corresponding letter saying, Mr. Wingfield does not invest in these sorts of activities. So no, I'm not going to give you any of my money. There's another stack of letters that say, Mr. Wingfield, I can't pay you back for that loan you gave me. Could you give me another 6 months? Could you give me another year? No, you owe me that money right now. So I think there were a whole bunch of miners who went, let's get rid of the guy. Let's pass this and he can go ahead and get out. So let's talk a little bit about mining women who go into politics. And we see that really from the very beginning. We're going to talk a little bit about assemblywomen first. The area that I've studied the most is women in the Nevada legislature. And down here is Ruth Averill. Ruth was from Nye County. Her father was a very prominent mining attorney, Mark Averill. And Ruth studied the law with her father, passed the bar right before she was elected to the legislature, and was also a kindergarten teacher, which I think perhaps it's helpful if you have a law degree, especially in mining law, to be a kindergarten teacher. And I had mentioned Daisy Allen, the daughter of Lem Allen, the gentleman who was so opposed to suffrage. Daisy served as a census taker in Belmont. She ran a restaurant in Fairview when it was booming. She was involved in running restaurants in Fallon, and she really represents the support system that every mining community needs. But up here, there were 4 women who were elected to the 1925 session, and one of them was Mame Schwebel. And Mame had been a prospector for 30 years. She and her husband owned a mine. He was ill, so she was the one who operated the mine. And she really did say this, that I can handle a muck stick with the best of them. What we don't know is where she is in this picture. She is somewhere here. That's probably Daisy. I think I'm hearing Liz's alarm is going off, telling me to, oh, good, it's gonna work.
Wherever it is. Oh, there it is. So sorry.
I think this might be Mame right here, but I'm not positive. So I do have to insert a plea. Please leave your family photos. If you have Nevada history connections, send copies to special collections, send copies to the Nevada Historical Society, your local historical society. The only way these, especially for women, the only way these women are remembered historically is if somebody has left evidence. Again, those of you who've seen Hamilton, Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, it really should be, if you've got prominent women in your family, be sure, or even non-prominent. Mom, I'll get your picture up to special collections. But those of you who've been involved in politics, those of you who've been involved in social movements, in business, whatever, plan to leave your papers somewhere. Special collections, the Nevada Historical Society, I'm always happy to talk about that. We need evidence before we can tell stories. But back to the legislators. Mabel Isbell represented Washoe County in 2 sessions. And her family was Isbell Construction. Some of you may remember that company. They started out as highway contractors. They built a lot of the highways in Nevada, but they were also the ones to innovate the use of highway equipment in open pit operations. Mabel was an officer in that company, and they revolutionized how mining was done on a large scale beginning in the 1950s. Some of you may have known, oops, there I go again. Doggone it, giving everything away too. Galen Spriggs was an assemblywoman from Nye County who had worked in mining as well. And then Jean Segerblom. Here she is in 1937 as a student at the Mackey School of Mines. She's welding in this photo. She didn't graduate from Mackey, unfortunately. She decided to become a teacher. But then was a legislator for 8 years. I had the great privilege of sitting next to her in committee, and just a delightful person who had some great stories about Mackey and about mining. So you find women in the mining industry in all kinds of places and ways. This particular couple, this is Dr. Mabel Young and Josie Alma Woods on their ranch in Eureka. Dr. Young was a dentist from a prominent family in Tuscarora, and she was also the mining reporter for the Gold Circle Mining District, which is where Midas is. She also had claims that she staked in various districts that didn't turn out to be anything. She did try to set up her own speculative town on top of somebody else's mining claims, and in many respects acted very much like prospectors that you would find in the 19-teens, 1920s. And Alma was elected to the legislature from Eureka County in the 40s and was the first woman to serve as the chair of the Committee on Taxation. This is just such a rare photo of Dr. Woods and of, see, I got it backwards again, Dr. Young and Ms. Woods. Just a wonderful story. Alma said, are any of you familiar with the Ballad of Josie? The Doris Day movie, I think, about a rancher. Alma always claimed that was her story, and that movie was based on her life. If you've seen the movie, you know darn good and well it has nothing to do with what it was like to live in Nevada in the 1920s and the 1930s. And of course, I have to call out the Women's Mining Coalition. This is a group that was organized in 1994, Debbie, is that 93? So last year was the 30-year anniversary. And the idea was go back to DC, take some women who work in mining, talk to legislators about what the impact of mining reform would be. It was going to be a one-shot deal. And here it is, 30 years, every year, this group goes back to Washington, D.C. These are women who make their living in mining and all sorts of activities. Some are truck drivers, some are consultants, some are executives. And it's an eye-opener for Congress people from the eastern states in particular, that actually these women are engaged in what really is a fundamental industry for Nevada and for the world. And so with that, now I'm done flipping through the slides. There's the end. I'll be happy to answer questions with Patty.
Okay, well, that was very interesting. Thank you, Dana. We'll do Q&A after we get the pleasure of hearing our next speaker. I'm going to just take this off. Okay. So our next speaker is someone I just adore. Patty Cafferata is an attorney, an author, as a historian. She is a lifelong resident of Reno, Nevada. She has had a diverse career in the law and politics. She served in the Nevada Assembly, and when she was elected Nevada State Treasurer in 1992, first woman elected to the constitutional office, just want to point that out. She became the first woman she also served as district attorney of Lincoln, Lander, and Esmeralda counties. She wrote and published 9 books on Nevada history, including University of Nevada Press's book, Christmas in Nevada, a history of how Nevadans have and continue to celebrate the holiday. And she co-authored her mother's memoirs, Barbara F. Vukanovich, From Nevada to Congress and Back Again, also published by the University of Nevada Press. She also serves as a public defender within Governor Lombardo's administration, helping defend defendants who otherwise can't afford representation. Patty has also been a member of the Nevada Women's Leadership Alliance Advisory Council from our humble beginnings. Thank you very much, Patty. She is always willing to help, hardly ever misses our events, and has provided sage advice along the way. We are honored to have her share her knowledge of the history of women in politics, which includes a lot of firsts, including her own as the first woman elected to the constitutional office in the same year that her mother was elected. And we'd like to thank her 3 children and 9 grandchildren for sharing her with us tonight. Patty, welcome.
No, I'm good with this. I think I gotta just put this down. So I'm Patty Cafferata. I always start with that. And I'm running for nothing. That's usually what the punchline comes after that. I would like to introduce my children who are here tonight. They've never heard me speak before. It's like, but I bribed them by buying dinner. So my daughter Elisa, son Jay, and Susan Kim, who is related to my son Reynolds. So, Dana talked a lot about local offices, and my talk is really about the major offices, the federal offices and the constitutional offices, the statewide offices. So I have gone through and looked at the history books, the political history, to figure out who was first. And where are the handouts? You all have, oh, okay, you already have them, all right. Oh, they're up here, okay, all right. So just talking about politics in general and elections, you know, you hear about the coattail effects. If somebody prominent wins high at the ticket, then the people down the bottom of the ticket. And I always thought that was one person. But in Nevada, what that means is if the prominent person who's running for the Senate or governor is of a political party, usually the longer down the ballot you go, they are most likely to get elected. And very infrequently do they buck the trend. Maybe there's an exception that a person running for a state treasurer or controller, nobody knows what these people do. And so if they're already there, then, you know, I'm here and I'm voting my party ticket. So, but there are a few occasions, but most most likely whoever's prominent on the top of the ticket is going to bring up the people at the bottom of the ticket. So if it's a Republican year, you can have Republicans in statewide office. If it's a Democrat year, you're going to have Democrats. So when you have that wonderful handout that Liz so nicely put together, the top sheet, she has the first elected people, but I want to really talk about the first women who bravely filed for office, which is the second sheet. No problem. I didn't tell you how to assemble it. Thank you for doing it. It looks very good. So just looking back, you now know about all the history about how women can run. And did you notice there are a lot of people, women in education? We think they're teachers. The offices that are secretary, oh, those are women's jobs, right? So we can vote for them. Those are the safe things. So very first, here, Edna Baker, if you're on page 2, she ran for the Board of Regents in 1916, and she actually won. And if you notice the top of the ticket, there's a lot, at the top of the list, a lot of Republicans, and then later on, it's a lot of Democrats, which shows you the trends in the state, because we became a state under Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, and everybody was a Republican at all levels. So no surprise, although 1916 isn't right after the Civil War, but we were still pretty Republican back then. So those days, the Board of Regents was a statewide race. You ran statewide. Today, that is not true. It's done by districts. So she bravely ran, and she won. Notice that asterisk, and then you see all those rest of those names, and then you get down to Barbara Vikanovich in 1982. Mom was the first one to run for that office and actually be elected. She was the first one to file and be elected in CD2, Congressional District 2. And Frankie Sue Del Papa in 1990, same thing. She was the first one to run for that, and then she was successful. So going back, and I do have Jean Dyer here on the State Assembly, because it was 1916, she ran as an independent. A lot of the early women did not belong to political parties. They were independent or nonpartisan, and she was an independent. And then if you look at Ann Martin, she was an independent, and that's usually not a good group to belong to. You need a political base. You either need to be a Republican or a Democrat, because you need that political base, and it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. But also in 1960, Lucy Parker ran for the Board of Regents. She was a socialist. And guess what? She didn't win. There's a moral to that story. So when you're considering running for office, be sure you belong to a political party. I don't care which one it is, but just join something. Then going down, 1918, again, this is all women didn't have the right to vote, did they? Should not. Not nationally. In Nevada, you could run and vote in 1918. That's when they first got the...
As I mentioned earlier, suffrage was passed in 1914, and that allowed women to vote and run for all state and some federal offices. So 1916 was the first regular election in which women could run for office, except city, because city is, it used to be city and county, used to be on odd numbered years. That would have been 1915, but you don't have city and county, so I shouldn't even have mentioned that.
Don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up.
Yes, so 1916 was the first year that women could run for a state office.
So, see this Secretary of State, that's a girl job, right? So she ran in 1918. She didn't win. Ann Martin, also the independent for U.S. Senate, she was quite a famous, she is one of the most famous women in Nevada history, certainly. And can you imagine those dirt roads and those automobiles driving around the state? It's bad enough with the interstate. Then Grace Wilds ran for state controller. She's a Democrat in 1918. She didn't win. Clara Cunningham, this is an interesting lady. She was a Republican. She ran for state treasurer, and she died in an automobile accident 2 weeks before the general election. And the Republicans decided you couldn't reprint the ballots or anything, so they let her stay. They left her on the ballot, and she got 9,000 votes. Everybody knew she was dead. But it was a Republican year. And had she lived, it is very likely she would have been the first woman elected to constitutional office in Nevada. So then, long time, lots of women have not run for governor, but Margie Dyer bravely filed as a Republican in 1970. She didn't win. Florence Fields, lieutenant governor, here's the Libertarian, 1978. She didn't win. Peggy Kavanaugh ran for Congress in CD1, which is Las Vegas. She ran against Harry. She didn't win. Then Barbara Kanish, mother, did run in 1982, and she served for 7 terms in CD2. Frankie Sue, yes, cheers for Mom. And there's, where is she? Where? There are some people here who worked for Mom. We got some right back there. And then Frankie Sue, again, the first time. And, just think about these. These are constitutional offices. And the first time some woman ran for them in 1982. That wasn't that long ago. And Frankie Sue ran in 1990 for AG. First woman to do it. It's amazing. Tessa Hafen, CD3, 62, 2006. Lucy Flores, CD4, 2016. None of them won. Susie Lee lost. The first time she ran, she lost the primary in 2016. She now is the representative in CD4. So, long time with any of those signing up. Just going back, not on the list, talking about Ann Martin, as we've all talked about. When she ran, she came in 3rd out of 4, so she didn't do very well. She got about 4,000 votes. The very next time a woman ran for that, 1974, Maya Miller. And she had a place out. I think she was pretty rich. Yes, she was pretty rich. I can't remember where she got her money, but she was pretty rich. She had a ranch out in Washoe Valley. And she lost to Harry Reid. No surprise. And he lost to Paul Laxalt. And that was back in 1974. Then Mary Gojak ran in 1980. She too lost to Paul Laxalt. She was a Democrat. 2012, Shelley Berkeley lost to Dean Heller. She was a Democrat. And she did ultimately get elected to Congress, but that was her foray. And then, of course, 2016, Catherine Cortez Masto she beat Joe Hecht, and she was the first woman elected to federal office, to the United States Senate from Nevada, and she's still there. I told you about Clara. Then we talk about other state treasurer candidates. 1926, I told you about Clara. She died in the automobile accident. And she got beat by Ed Malley, who embezzled all the money out of the state treasury. He did time in prison. And when I used to talk about being state treasurer and some of the history, his son was still alive. And, he's talked to me one time and said, I hope you won't mention my father. so as long as he was alive, I didn't do it. 1930, Clara Carrie Devine, Democrat, won the primary, and she lost to George Russell, Republican, who was appointed when Ed Malley went to the slammer. He was one, and then sort of changing. I need a drink of water. Sorry. Okay, hiding behind the sign. Then we're talking about superintendent of instruction, which, that's a girl's job, right? And the first one to be the superintendent of public instructions was a lady named Mildred Bray. And she was originally appointed and then she was elected in 1938. She was a nonpartisan. By then, that used to be a partisan office, and it had been changed by then. It's, there are some partisan or nonpartisan offices, like sheriff is nonpartisan, city councils are, and those all used to be partisan jobs, and the judges used to be partisan jobs. Now they're all nonpartisan. But Mildred, her father was the superintendent. She didn't succeed him. There was a couple people in between, but she got the job. She was reelected in 42, 46, 1950, and then she did not run in 54. So she, sometimes women succeed their husbands if their husbands die or something in office. I mean, you see this nationally, the Senate and Congress, oftentimes, even sometimes the governors, their husbands passed away or their fathers. As far as governors go, in 1970, I mentioned Margie Dyer. She was a Republican. She lost the primary. In 1974, this was a delightful woman. Her name was Shirley Crumpler. She was a Republican. She was a pretty blonde, and she went all over the state saying, there's a new way to say governor. It's Crumpler. And of course, Mike O'Callahan cleaned her clock, but she was the first woman to win a primary for governor, and but then of course she lost. But she came out okay. She met a wonderful guy on the campaign trail, and she married him. So it wasn't all bad. In 1986, I ran for governor after my state treasurer. I have all the T-shirts. I don't have the jobs, but I have the T-shirts. So I just finished my term as state treasurer, and Dick Bryan and I are very good friends now. But there were things he was doing when he was governor and I was state treasurer I didn't like, and so what the heck? So I was looking for something to do after I lost the treasurer's race, sitting around the dining room table talking to my husband and my daughter Elisa. It's all her fault. So, well, now what am I going to do? I don't have a job, right? And she said to me, why don't you go to law school? If you think law schools go great, why don't you just go to law school? Because she had gone to law school, gotten married after the first year. She called me and said, I'm getting married. I said, don't do it. You'll drop out of law school. 4 weeks after she got married, she called and said, I'm dropping out of law school. So paybacks was, if you think law schools go great, why don't you go to law school? So I said to my husband, can I go to law school? And he said, I don't care, as long as my life doesn't change. So I ran his medical practice, I want you to know. So Jay worked in his office. She would pack up all the bills and the checks and mail them to me, and I would sign them and mail them. I cut his hair. Starting in medical school because we couldn't afford the 50 cents for the barber. And so I came home once a month. I cut his hair. I did the laundry. I did the grocery shopping. And basically, I guess his life never changed because I made it through. And just on a side note, there were like 36 other governor's races that year, and I came in probably dead last percentage-wise out of all the 36. I lost by 122,000 votes. But I got to go to law school. Okay, so other women who have run for governor, Cheryl Lau, she lost the primary in 1994. She was a Republican. 1998, Jan Jones, former mayor of Las Vegas, Democrat. She lost the primary. One of the things that happens when women run for office, I don't think this is probably true as much today, but early on, they could file, they'd lose their primaries. They rarely got to be in the general election ballot. And if you look back, that's basically what happened. And Jan, I think later on, did run and won the primary. She didn't win the general election. In 2002, a woman named Barbara Scott, a Democrat, lost the primary. And Shirley Cook, a Republican, lost the primary. I don't know either one of them. And Lorraine Hunt, who became our lieutenant governor in 2006, she ran for governor and lost. And then Dina Titus ran, Democrat. She's been congresswoman for years now in Las Vegas, but she ran for governor and she lost. She won the primary, but she lost the governorship. And so then the lieutenant governor jobs, or the job, 1978, Florence Fields. If you look at your list, you see libertarians. Third-party candidates don't have primaries, so they wind up on the general election ballot. They don't win, but they escape going through the process. And so Florence Fields ran as a libertarian in 78. She lost to Byron Levitt. In 1978 was the first time I ran. That was another interesting race. I ran for state treasurer. And my husband rued the day, God rest his soul, when I had worked very hard for Ronald Reagan for president, and he had lost to Gerald Ford. And then I worked very hard for Gerald Ford, and he had lost. And so my husband said to me, you should run for office. Can you imagine anybody saying that? So you should run for office. Then you'd have a candidate you'd know you could rely on. And like I said, he rued that day, I'll tell you. Because I was off and running. So in 1978, I won the primary. I beat another woman named Dee Clem. None of the above came in second to me in the primary. And then I lost the general election by 14,000 votes. The same year, 1978, Sherry Fields, Florence Fields, Sherry Fields, both libertarians. I assume they were related. She was the first woman to run for controller, and she lost. She came in third out of three. In 1982, I had a choice. In between, I had been elected to the Nevada legislature. I was in the assembly. I represented Southwest Reno. I worked very hard. It was a Republican district, and I won my primary by one vote because everybody knew I was going to win. So, they didn't need to vote. So two people in my family didn't vote. Yeah. So I always tell candidates, be sure everybody in your family votes for you. Just don't think that you're going to win, right? And, there were excuses. My sister had gone off to college, and she'd gotten an absentee ballot, and she didn't vote it because she came home. And so she thought she couldn't vote. So she didn't. All I can say is a good thing I won, right? Been bad after that. And George Vukanovich, my stepfather's mother, was in assisted living, but she was fully competent. She was a registered voter. Nobody bothered to take her a ballot because, I was going to win. So the other part of the race was I knocked on all the doors. I had targeting. I did everything. But I did one thing. I went through the voter list, and anybody I knew that I felt very comfortable about asking, I said, would you mind changing your registration to Republican? And I got 12 people to say yes. We went out to their houses. We took the registration forms. We got them to change. We handed them another registration form that they could change back after the primary. Only 1% out of the 12 actually did that. But when you win by one vote and you get 12 people to change their voter registration, that probably meant more than my knocking on every door. Anyway, so, and then my opponent, one of my opponents in that, no, different, that was back in the assembly race. Okay, never mind. In 1982, I did win. I won by 2,647 votes. That's about a vote a precinct statewide. It's the closest of all the constitutional races that I've looked at for women. That's not a lot of votes. But anyway, I became the first woman elected to constitutional office when that happened. The constitutional offices are governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer, controller, and attorney general. Mother, as I mentioned, Barbara Vukanovich won in 1982, 84, 86, 88, 90, 92, 94, and then she retired. And she was one of the Cardinals, which is one of the committee chairmen who managed the budget, and Mark Amadei, the current congressman, he was a Cardinal. He was the first one since about the 1920s. There was a Democrat from Nevada who was also a Cardinal for one term. Mark became the third one from Nevada, of course, Republican, and he he's Homeland Security, so that's really a high honor for him. Secretary of State, going back, 1996, Frankie Sue won the primary the first time, and then she became the Secretary of State. She beat another woman. And the first time Mother ran for Congress, she beat two other women. There were no men in the race, so it was going to be a woman. It was one of those things. She ran against Mary Gojak and a libertarian named Terry Vucetta. And Terry just really liked my mother. And so she'd call Mother up just before debates and stuff and say, hey, Barbara, what are you wearing tonight? I want to make sure that we're, coordinated. And she really apparently didn't think much of Mary Gojak. But anyway, so Frankie Sue beat Barbara Zimmer, who was an assemblywoman from Las Vegas. And then Lieutenant Governor, 1990, Sue Wagner, of course, she beat another woman, Jeannie Ireland, who was her husband was a athletic director or coach up at UNR. Very, very well, long history family. And Sue beat her. In 1990, Cheryl Lau became Secretary of State. Frankie Sue moved on to Attorney General. And she was elected in 94 and 98. And also Lieutenant Governor, 2002, Lorraine Hunt did make it as Lieutenant Governor, Republican, and she was reelected. You think today, I didn't do a lot of analysis about today, but, women are really big in office in Nevada. Our legislature is majority woman, both houses. The Nevada Supreme Court. Yeah, yes. Nevada Supreme Court, predominantly women. The Washoe County 2nd Judicial District Court bench, predominantly women. And of course, our congresswomen, our congresswomen are women. Dina Titus, Shelley Berkeley was, Susie Lee. So it's like, we've come a long way, baby, as they say. And I guess just a couple other interesting facts if you haven't heard them. Kathy Augustine. Anybody remember Kathy Augustine? Our first controller, woman controller. Just a attractive gal. She had been in the legislature. And I did look this up last night. She was impeached by our assembly for misconduct. Allegedly, she was using her staff for campaign activities like writing speeches and things like that on state time. The Senate did not convict her. One has to sort of indict. That's the impeachment, and then the Senate decides, and the Senate did not impeach her or remove her. But that was in 1998, and then 2002, she was murdered. You all remember that? So her fourth husband, Chaz Higgs, is his name. He was in the medical field. He wasn't a doctor. He was a nurse, I believe. Really a great guy. If you're looking for, the cute young thing that the guys look for, well, she got the good-looking guy. He was a little younger than she was. And he really eye candy. He went everywhere. He really, at the campaign stuff, it totally was not interested at all. He just sort of stood there. So she, I guess, didn't wake up one morning. And so she went into Washoe Med, renowned, I guess it's renowned now, dating myself. And I actually happened to be in the hospital that day. I don't even know why I was there. It wasn't a place I hung out, but I was there. And and it was in the news. She was there in critical care unit, and I saw him coming in, and he had a very strange demeanor. It was sort of like he was frantic. And I stopped him and we chatted and, how's things going? Oh, and he was running up the stairs to the ICU and down the stairs and up the stairs. And it was like, this isn't somebody who's worried that my wife is dying. It was just very strange, I thought, his behavior. And then it turned out that he had injected her with a medication. And after that, he did go to prison, and I did check. He's still there. Because if you want to know who's in prison, you can look it up on the some prison website, right? You just put in their name, and you can look them up. And I wanted to see if he was still there since I was given this speech. I mean, it isn't something I always look everybody up on, but hey, I'm a defense lawyer, right? I'm looking for these guys. Anyway, I did want to look just because I was going to talk about this tonight. And after that, Kathy's third husband had died in a hospital. And Chaz Higgs was medical personnel involved. They actually went back and exhumed his body to find out if he had actually killed him too. And it turned out negative. But anyway, it was just sort of, what a happy note to end on. And there you are. So I hope I'm in the time limit.
You are well within the time limit. Oh, that was wonderful. I just want to say thank you very much. Let's give a good round of applause for Dana and Patty. That was very entertaining. So I would like to entertain, we only have one microphone, but if anyone would like to ask these two icons in Nevada any questions, please raise your hand and you might need to just use your teacher voice and ask it, but I'll roll, okay.
I guess my question's for Patty, or it's not really a question, but years ago you gave me a copy of a paper that you did on the distributed school account, and you had an argument that it was all our financial problems in the schools were because of a theft many years ago. And I wondered if you wanted to share that at all. I thought it was interesting.
I'm going to leave the mic from up here and you guys can just shout.
Okay, so the first state treasurer, his name was Eben Rhodes. It wasn't a girl, it was Eben. And he embezzled all the money out of the permanent school fund and the state general fund. And the general fund, it took till 1930 to replace the money that had been lost. And if you understand compound interest, if you have money in the bank and you're earning interest on it, every year it gets bigger and bigger. And so it took them to the 1930s to pay off the territorial debt, the territorial bonds. The money in the state permanent school fund is you use the interest and it goes to all the education budget. There was a lot of back and forth. They tried to get in the old days. Today you get the treasurer is bonded. There's a company that bonds them. In the old days, back in the 1860s, people put up bond money and they were the rich guys in the state. And of course, they didn't want to come up with the money, so they didn't. And when I was at a state treasurer's conference in the 1980s, we had $30 million in our permanent school fund. That's from 1964. I was talking to the treasurer from Idaho. She had $300 million. Now, you just think about the compound interest on that. And I mean, Nevada was really at a disadvantage because of that. When Ed Malley, when I talked about him, when he embezzled the money, the legislature figured out that was not a very good idea. So they raised property taxes for 10 years to pay off what he stole. But that's the story of the education and how it really hurt our state. And the treasurer died of an overdose of cocaine in San Francisco while he was in office.
Any other questions?
This isn't really a question, it's a memory to share. Dana, thank you for showing the picture of the Women's Mining Coalition. That means an awful lot to us. But Patty, your mother was really instrumental in our first couple of years on the Hill because she took us under her wing. And there is a photograph, and I know, Dana, you keep saying you've got to get photographs into the archives. There is this marvelous photograph of about 90 women that were attending that particular meeting of the Women's Mining Coalition, and your mother standing in the middle in Statuary Hall. It's a black and white photo, and we look like little ants, compared to the grandeur of all of the statues and everything. And I'm sure she made that happen. That she carved out time and she arranged for us to be able to go into Statuary Hall, which you really can't hardly do anymore. And it's this marvelous photograph. And we really need to make sure that we get that into some kind of archive.
Mother's papers are, and my papers, are up at special collections at the University of Nevada Press, where she donated over 100 banker's boxes of materials. And it's her official life. It was from Congress, so it's not the personal papers. And they have organized it. There will be a showing in October, I believe, of this year. They will be opening the papers and everything. So don't know about that. Can I tell one mining story? She loved mining. She was on the head of interior. She was on the Interior Committee until she made it to appropriations. But one time in the mining camps, we hit a lot of mining camps campaigning, and we went to Ione. How many people have been to Ione? Whoa, lots of people. Lots of, so it was Ione days or something, and you go out and it's like 300 people there, and they have the big vats, and I mean vats of beans and everything, and they had lady mud wrestling. I don't know how. Was shaking her head. So we didn't know what we were getting into. We were just going to the celebration. And George Vukanovich was a pilot. They had a plane, and so we flew around a lot of the state, and we did fly into Ione. And these are dirt strips. I mean, it's not like the Reno airport. Anyway, so the afternoon entertainment was lady mud wrestling. So there were these bleachers. These are just slats, right? And there's no handrails or anything, and you climb up on them. And so we got up, and Mother and I were in the middle. I can't remember where my husband or George were, but anyway, we were in the middle. So there's two women, and you all know mining mud. It's pretty sloppy stuff, right? And the women are in these pits up to about here. And these two are going at it. And the woman behind Mother is yelling, "Knock her down, Lil! Knock her down, Lil!" And people are turning around and looking at my mother like she's the one saying, it's like, and there's no way to get out. I mean, there's all these people in front of you. And it was like, that was the last time we went to mud wrestling.
That was very wonderful. Any other questions? Alexis, and then I'll go to Jim. Okay. Okay.
Congress and back again, amazing book, especially if you love history and you want to know all the ins and outs of rural Nevada. And then the other book, Ann Martin, The Long Campaign by You and Our Press. Both of those campaigns have so much in common because guess what? They went to rural Nevada. And I live here in Washoe County. I love Washoe. I'm a Sparks girl, but I'll tell you what, the rurals are the check on. And when we looked at those suffragette numbers, it was the rurals who tempered Washoe to have some common sense. So we should never forget that our rural components have that little bit of common sense that sometimes we lose sight of when we get so urbanized. And that's what makes Nevada so fabulous. It's just this urban-rural interface, and we need each other. We don't need to be like this. We need to be like that. When you brought up Assemblywoman, I think it was Assemblywoman Sagerbloom, is it the mother of Chick Sagerbloom? So for those maybe telling that went on to be Assemblyman, now Senator, quite colorful.
So Tick Sagerbloom is the fourth generation in his family to serve in the Nevada legislature. And it started with Senator Bell from Humboldt County, who was Jean's grandfather, Tick's great-grandfather, and he voted against suffrage. And Jean loved to tell the story about her grandfather voting against the resolution that would allow women to vote. And his reason for voting against it was because politicking in those days happened in bars, and he didn't think that women belonged in bars trying to get votes and being engaged in politics. So Senator Bell was the first in their family. The next in their family was his daughter, Hazel Wines, Jean's mother, was elected to the assembly from Humboldt County. And then Jean was elected from Clark County, and Tick was elected from Clark County. So there aren't very many multi-generational families in the Nevada legislature, and there certainly aren't many multi-generational men and women families in the legislature. But that's Jean was very proud of her legislative pedigree.
I was going to tell another bar story. You know, when you've run as many times as I have, you collect these things. So I think we were in Battle Mountain, and usually, you know, the Democrats all campaign together and the Republicans all campaign together, right? You're out in the rurals and you do the parades and all the celebrations and all of that. And we were in Battle Mountain, and DeVoe Heaton was our lieutenant governor candidate. Nicest guy in the whole world. So you're in and out the bars, right? And you buy a round of drinks for everybody, right? That's how you get your votes. And so, you know, then you have to drink too. And DeVoe was a devoted Mormon, and out we went in, and everybody's doing the drinks and rounds, and we come out, and he says, "I feel like such a sissy when I have to order 7-Up." Just like, it was like, you know, I wasn't drinking either, but anyway, that was the.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, Jim, I'm sorry.
I'm just dying to know, is the dueling restriction still on the book? And was that was it only for women?
Oh, that's-
Was it anyone?
So the dueling provision in the Constitution, again, remember the Constitution was adopted in 1864, and it was there was concern about former Confederates being able to vote, and this was one way to keep Confederates from voting because there was this assumption that everybody in the South was dueling. That provision, you all may have voted to get rid of it. It was taken out of the Constitution relatively recently. I want to say maybe like the last part of the 20th century, maybe very early 21st century, but it was in the Constitution for a very long time. Yeah.
Dana, did you have, as the head of the mining association as a woman, I think you were the first and only at the time, how did the men treat you in your different organizational meetings and things like that and conferences? Were you, thank you little lady, or?
In a bar. We'll have that conversation in a bar. No. So one of my favorite stories about the Nevada Mining Association, you know, I talked to SME not too long ago about the guy who served the longest in this role. He had a different title, but he was essentially my predecessor at the Mining Association. And following him was the first time that the association had an office manager. And her name was Vern Foster. And the job was created for Vern. She had been widowed unexpectedly. And Foster Field, Foster Drive, all named after her husband, who was a very popular coach. And she was the office manager for the Mining Association. She did not have the role of president, but in essence, she was doing a lot of the same sorts of things that I did later. In her oral history is great. She pulled out all the skeletons and she shook them all over the place. And she said, a woman will never lead the Nevada Mining Association. The men will never allow it. Fast forward a few years, that was not an issue. The year that I interviewed for the position and the year that I was chosen for the position, there were 5 candidates, and I think 3 of us were women, maybe 2. And I was always treated with respect and the dignity that that office came with. But I also know how to drink my whiskey neat. And love going on mine sites. So it's sort of a convoluted kind of way to answer the question. I was always treated very well. It was a fabulous experience, one of the highlights of my life.
And the men voted for you.
And the men voted for me.
Oh, here we go.
Lady mud wrestlers, are there any other mentors that you had?
Fortunately, I missed the last part of the question. What was it? Besides my mother? That really was an experience. No, my mother was probably my biggest role model. You know, and when you think about it, we were both elected in 1982. First time for both women. So there really weren't other women to look at. So no, but certainly my mother and I were very close. We traveled the campaign trail together the years that she was in office and that I was running or in office. So, and in fact, she, besides for my husband saying you ought to can run, when I first started to think about running in 1978, because I grew up in a very politically active family, my family was always, my mother was very involved. I remember, you know, sitting on her bedroom floor, collating materials for other candidates that go out and go door to door with. So thinking about 1978, besides for my husband's suggestion, and that might have come first, and then I said to her, well, gee, I think I'd, you know, like to run for office. I think I'd like to maybe run for the county commissioner. You know, you don't usually start at a statewide race. I mean, that's not usually how it works. You know, I thought, well, you know, county commission. She said, you don't want to do that. All they do is talk about zoning. I was like, what? Is that right, Claire? Anyway, so, you know, she said, you ought to run for state treasurer. And the state treasurer at the time was Mike Marabelli. Anybody remember Mike? A great old, yeah, my kids started raising their hands. I remember Mike. He was just a fine, handsome Italian guy. He was really a nice man. They had Mirabelli Records. Knew him well because, you know, I used to go in the store when I was a kid and all that stuff. But he was known as the phantom treasurer because he never went to work. And that was probably a good thing because he didn't know about it. So it was good his staff was running it. So that's how I came to run. But it was really my mother, and, you know, she was the role model.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, ladies. Don't go anywhere. I have a little something for you. As a token of our esteem, we'll have a lovely little gift for both of you. You're very welcome. And aren't they amazing? Thank you very much, ladies. So that is about all we have for tonight. I will let you know that there's a couple of date to save. Middle of July, we will be doing a training. I talked about this at the last Leadership Speaker Series dinner. We were planning to do it next week, but our speaker that is going to be doing the training and I have concluded we're going to change it to July, and that will be a messaging and communications class about fast, effective communications, and that's applicable to anything that you do, whether it's stakeholder outreach or knocking on doors or working on a ballot initiative or advocating for a cause that you care about. You need to be able to tell your story in less than a minute sometimes, and sometimes a minute and a half or 3. And you need to get everything in there that's important, and it needs to be catchy and rememberable. So that's what you're going to learn in this class, and it'll be you'll if you're on our mailing list, please. If you're not on our mailing list, make sure that your name is over there, and you want to be on our, because you have to, agree to be on our mailing. We don't just add you without your permission, but you'll get the notice about that. Also, in August, we'll have another one of these, and it will be featuring women in mining. Perhaps maybe some of the people at this table over here might be speakers. But we're looking for women's firsts. One of our dearest friends was the first woman elected to the Society of Mining Engineers, which is a global technical society. For example, that we haven't quite got all the other lineup done yet, but you'll hear a panel session, much like the Women in Congress or the Women in Construction session that we had before, all about the ups and downs and how you manage to get through your leadership trajectory on your career and or your civic engagement in terms of association work and boards and commissions, etc. Because that's the nexus we usually have, is that leadership pathway. So with that, we should do the drawing. Would you like to, one of these two ladies, draw the card? This is for the door prize. Last time I almost forgot to do it at all. Alexis Hansen, woohoo! Look at this business card. Isn't this like the coolest? Wow. Okay, well, thank you very, very much for everyone coming tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you to the Women's Nevada History Project for sending out the information. I'm glad many of your club members were able to come. And thank you to the Women's Mining Coalition and Lindsay Wright, who's here, who's the manager, for sending out the notices and stuff. And that's it. Thank you very much.